Part 1. What if your workout is silently destroying your sleep? Welcome back to the channel. If you are serious about biohacking, if you track your HRV every morning, obsess over your Oura Ring sleep score, experiment with fasting windows and red light therapy, then you have probably spent a lot of time asking what to do. Today, I want to flip that question on its head and ask you something you have almost certainly never been asked by your doctor, your PT, or any generic wellness influencer. When are you doing it? Because here is what 8 months of relentless self-experimentation, continuous wearable data, fasting blood panels, and a physician-grade understanding of circadian biology taught me. The timing of your interventions is not a minor detail. It is the hidden architecture that determines whether every other thing you do, your Zone 2 cardio, your strength training, your cold plunges, your supplement stack, actually works or quietly cancels itself out. I am talking about circadian rhythm biohacking, and I promise you, by the end of this video, you will never think about your morning routine the same way again. My name is Dr. Dima Martini-Drew. I'm a physician specializing in metabolism and rare diseases and the founder of Cortex Bio. In 2025, I embedded myself at the FIT Partnership, a longevity-focused training facility in Escher, and turned my own body into a precision metabolic laboratory. I used an Oura Ring to track sleep architecture, heart rate variability, and recovery scores every single night. I ran fasting blood panels to map metabolic shifts. I kept meticulous exercise timing logs, and I systematically varied when and how I trained to map my personal circadian architecture. The results were, frankly, unequivocal, and they have significant implications not just for elite biohackers, but for anyone who works a demanding job, travels across time zones, has neurodivergent wiring, struggles with metabolic health, or simply wants to age as well as humanly possible. So stay with me. This video is long, it is dense, and it will give you a biohacking protocol that most people, even those deep in the community, have never properly implemented. Let's get into it. Part 2. The Circadian Problem. Why one-size-fits-all health advice is biologically broken. Let me start with the core problem, because without understanding it deeply, none of the solutions will make sense. Current mainstream health advice is population averaged. Everything you have ever been told, exercise 30 minutes a day, sleep 7 to 9 hours, eat at regular intervals, those recommendations are built from studies on thousands of people, then flattened into a single prescription handed to every individual who walks through a clinic door. And that approach has one catastrophic flaw. It completely ignores the profound biological heterogeneity that defines human circadian metabolism. Your circadian clock is not just the thing that makes you feel jet-lagged. It is a master regulatory system that governs virtually every physiological process in your body: hormone secretion, insulin sensitivity, immune function, cellular repair, even gene expression. And here is the key insight from chronobiology. Your metabolic organs are not passive recipients of your master brain clock. Your skeletal muscle, your liver, your adipose tissue, they each have their own peripheral clocks, running semi-autonomously, ticking in sync with your behavior patterns, your light exposure, your meal timing, and critically, your exercise timing. When those peripheral clocks fall out of alignment with your central brain clock, a state called circadian misalignment, you get a cascade of metabolic dysfunction, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cognitive decline, chronic fatigue. These are not just diseases of poor lifestyle choices. They are, at least in part, diseases of biological timing. Now, mainstream health advice does not account for this. It cannot because it is not designed to. A generic prescription for morning exercise will optimize sleep for one person and completely destroy it for another, depending on that individual's chronotype, their neurobiology, their metabolic phenotype, and dozens of other variables that a population study simply cannot capture. This is the biohacking opportunity hiding in plain sight. Not a new supplement, not a viral cold exposure hack, but the systematic, data-driven discovery of your unique circadian phenotype and the deliberate design of your entire 24-hour existence around it. That is what circadian rhythm biohacking actually means, and that is exactly what I spent 8 months rigorously testing on myself. Part 3. The Experiment. 8 months of self-experimentation, what the data actually showed. Let me walk you through exactly what I measured, how I measured it, and what the data revealed, because in biohacking, the methodology matters as much as the result. Over 8 months at the FIT partnership, I wore an Oura Ring continuously, capturing sleep architecture every night, including sleep quality scores on a scale of 0 to 100, total sleep duration, REM and NREM ratios, heart rate variability, and resting heart rate trends. I also logged every single training session with precise timestamps and noted subjective energy and focus scores throughout each day. The FIT partnership itself offered a remarkable experimental environment. It integrates strength training, metabolic conditioning, Pilates, yoga, cryotherapy, infrared sauna, red light therapy, and hyperbaric oxygen therapy under one roof. This allowed me to test not just exercise timing, but the downstream effects of every recovery modality, and to layer those findings onto continuous wearable data in real time. Here is what the data showed, unambiguously. When I anchored my primary training sessions between 08:30 and 10:30 in the morning, consistently within the same circadian window, my sleep quality score improved from a baseline average of 82 out of 100 to a peak of 96 out of 100. That is a 14-point improvement. My sleep duration extended from 6.2 hours to 7.1 hours per night. My recovery scores climbed from 80 to 88 out of 100, and my resting heart rate, one of the cleanest biomarkers of cardiovascular fitness and recovery capacity, dropped from 58 beats per minute to 52 beats per minute over the same period. Those are not marginal gains. In clinical terms, those are meaningful, significant changes in multiple independent biomarkers produced by a single systematic intervention, moving my training earlier in the day. Now here's the flip side. When I allowed my training to drift into the afternoon or evening, anything after 1400, the data went in the opposite direction with equal force. Sleep quality scores dropped to 68 out of 100. Duration fell to 5.9 hours. The primary mechanisms were clear on the wearable data. Elevated nocturnal heart rate persisting through the night, and a measurable delay in the onset of the low heart rate deep sleep phases, consistent with delayed melatonin onset caused by sympathetic nervous system activation from late exercise. The dose-dependent relationship was striking. The later the training session, the worse the sleep metrics. Not a cliff edge, a gradient. And this is consistent with large-scale wearable population data showing that later high-strain exercise is dose-dependently associated with shorter sleep duration, lower quality scores, and higher nocturnal heart rate. My N=1 data was not an anomaly. It was a precise personal calibration of a broadly real phenomenon. Part 4. The Science of Circadian Exercise. Why morning exercise is circadian medicine. The biology. Let me explain the science behind these results, because understanding the mechanism is what separates a real biohacker from someone who just follows protocols blindly. Exercise is now firmly established in chronobiology as a non-photic Zeitgeber, a time cue for your biological clock that works independently of light. Photic Zeitgebers, like sunlight, primarily entrain your central brain clock in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. But exercise has the power to directly phase shift your peripheral clocks in your muscles, your liver, your fat tissue, independent of the light signal. This means that when you exercise, you are not just burning calories or building muscle, you are actively resetting the biological timing of multiple metabolic organs simultaneously. This has enormous implications for biohacking longevity, metabolic disease management, and cognitive performance. Reviews published in Nature Reviews Endocrinology have demonstrated that regular, timed exercise can reset peripheral clocks in models of metabolic disease, improving glycemic control and lipid handling through both systemic and tissue-specific mechanisms. When peripheral clocks are chronically misaligned, as they are in shift workers, frequent travelers, and people with metabolic syndrome, timed exercise is one of the most potent tools available to resynchronize them. Now, morning exercise in particular, especially in the fasted state, works with your biology rather than against it for 4 converging reasons. First, cortisol is naturally elevated in the early morning, enhancing acute fat oxidation, metabolic stress signaling, and the recruitment of fast-twitch muscle fibers. Second, your core body temperature is rising through the morning, which creates natural alignment with the exercise temperature rhythm, meaning your muscles, joints, and cardiovascular system are primed for performance in a way they simply are not at 7 a.m. or 9 p.m. Third, peripheral clocks in muscle, liver, and adipose tissue are most receptive to entrainment in the morning window, making exercise maximally effective as a Zeitgeber at this time. Fourth, and critically for sleep optimization, melatonin has fully cleared from your system by mid-morning, which means morning exercise carries zero risk of suppressing or delaying the melatonin rise you need in the evening. Contrast that with evening exercise. When you train at 7 or 8 p.m., you are elevating core body temperature at the exact window when melatonin needs to start rising and core temperature needs to start falling. You are triggering sympathetic nervous system activation that suppresses the parasympathetic tone required for sleep onset, and you are creating acute metabolic stress that research shows can interfere with sleep onset for 8 or more hours post-exercise. That is why your late evening HIIT session feels great in the moment, but costs you your deep sleep, and why no amount of magnesium glycinate or sleep hygiene ritual will fully compensate for that upstream biological disruption. The molecular mechanism driving the fitness benefits of exercise is equally fascinating. A single bout of high-intensity interval training can rapidly increase the nuclear abundance of PGC1 alpha, the master regulator of mitochondrial biogenesis in human skeletal muscle. This triggers transcriptional programs for new mitochondrial production that unfold over the following 24 to 48 hours. Morning exercise, when circadian factors are most favorable, appears to optimize this PGC1 alpha signaling response, meaning you are not just training smarter, you are stimulating more mitochondrial growth per session. For anyone interested in biohacking mitochondria, and that should be every serious longevity enthusiast, this is the protocol. Part 5. The Movement System. The Integrated Movement Stack. Strength plus Pilates plus yoga. Now let me get specific about the actual movement protocol, because timing alone is not the complete biohacking picture. The modality of movement matters enormously, and the integration of different training types within your circadian window creates compounding benefits that none of them deliver in isolation. At the Fit Partnership, I structured my training around 3 complementary pillars: strength and metabolic conditioning, Pilates, and yoga. And I want to be precise about why each of these is non-negotiable in a complete biohacking movement system, not just fashionable wellness choices. Strength training and high-intensity metabolic conditioning are the non-negotiable foundation. The evidence base for exercise as a mitochondrial therapy in humans is dominated by endurance and interval training data. Human biopsy studies consistently show that these modalities increase mitochondrial enzyme activity, respiratory capacity, and markers of mitochondrial mass. Exercise training rated at an evidence strength of 95 out of 100, with an evidence grade A in systematic reviews of human randomized controlled trials, meaning it has robust, reproducible mitochondrial benefits across age groups, fitness levels, and disease states. No supplement, no biohacking gadget, and no pharmaceutical agent comes close to this evidence base. Calorie restriction scores 45. NAD plus precursors like NMN score 35. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy scores 25. Cold exposure scores 20. Squats and intervals are still the intervention. Everything else is adjunct. Pilates serves as the structural and core stability layer of this system, where strength training builds the metabolic engine, expanding muscle as a metabolic organ, improving insulin sensitivity, driving mitochondrial biogenesis. Pilates protects the mechanical chassis. It builds deep core integrity, protects joint health, and enables more efficient force transfer during resistance work. From a longevity biohacking perspective, Pilates dramatically reduces injury risk and preserves the mobility that makes long-term exercise adherence possible. You cannot train your mitochondria if your spine or knees stop cooperating. Yoga provides the third and often most undervalued layer: parasympathetic activation, breath-led nervous system regulation, and flexibility. For biohackers focused on HRV, heart rate variability, as a measure of autonomic nervous system health, yoga is one of the most potent non-pharmacological HRV improvers available. Regular yoga practice measurably increases parasympathetic tone, which directly supports deeper sleep architecture, faster recovery between training sessions, and better stress resilience. For those managing ADHD or other neurodivergent wiring, as I was, yoga also provides the breath regulation tools that directly dampen the hyperactivation of the sympathetic nervous system that so often accompanies neurodivergent cognitive profiles. The integration is the point: load plus lengthening, structure plus softness, metabolic stimulus plus nervous system restoration. When all three are scheduled within the morning circadian window, with strength and metabolic work as the primary stimulus and Pilates or yoga as the closing parasympathetic wind-down, you create a complete morning biohacking session that triggers mitochondrial biogenesis and trains peripheral clocks and sets the HRV trajectory for the rest of the day. Part 6: Neurodiversity and HBOT. The neurodivergent variable, HBOT, ADHD, and unconscious habit formation. Now I want to address something that rarely gets discussed in the biohacking community: the intersection of neurodivergent wiring with circadian optimization, because it was one of the most significant discoveries of this entire 8-month experiment. In parallel with the circadian timing work, I underwent hyperbaric oxygen therapy at the FIT partnership. HBOT is attracting serious attention in neurology, aging science, and performance medicine. Mechanistically, HBOT increases dissolved oxygen in plasma several-fold, transiently elevating tissue oxygen tension, modulating reactive oxygen species, and triggering redox-sensitive signaling pathways that influence mitochondrial function, angiogenesis, and inflammation. A randomized controlled trial in middle-aged master athletes reported that 40 sessions of HBOT at 2.0 atmospheres absolute with 100% oxygen improved VO2 max, anaerobic threshold, and skeletal muscle mitochondrial respiration and mass markers compared with sham control. Preclinical work indicates that HBOT may promote mitochondrial biogenesis via the SIRT1 and PGC1 alpha axis, the same pathway activated by exercise, suggesting a potential synergistic mechanism when HBOT is used alongside timed training. This is emerging evidence, not yet at the robustness level of exercise, but it is a legitimate biohacking adjunct when used in proportion to the evidence, not as a replacement for the fundamentals. Here is where it got personal. I received a late diagnosis of ADHD at the age of 52, and subjectively, the HBOT sessions were associated with a noticeable shift in cognitive texture, sharper focus, improved stamina for sustained deep work, greater executive function capacity. This is consistent with early data suggesting HBOT can improve attention and executive function in some populations, though the mechanism in ADHD specifically requires much more rigorous investigation before firm conclusions can be drawn. But here is the truly striking finding, the one that only became apparent in retrospect. After years of failing to maintain consistent gym attendance, a classic neurodivergent adherence challenge where the dopamine novelty of a new gym fades rapidly and the executive function cost of overriding competing stimuli becomes prohibitive, my attendance at the FIT partnership became automatic, not motivated, not disciplined, automatic. From a behavioral science perspective, this is the signature of unconscious habit formation. Repeated, satisfactory exercise experiences in a stable and predictable context gradually transfer behavioral control from deliberate, effortful intention to automatic cue-response loops. Over time, the decision of whether to go to the gym is simply removed from the cognitive load equation. And for a neurodivergent individual, this transition from willpower-based to design-based adherence is not just convenient, it is transformative. The mechanism appears to be multi-layered: reinforcement. The metabolic benefit of morning training, the improved energy, focus, and mood that a circadian-aligned session produces, creates a strong metabolic reward that the unconscious brain rapidly learns to associate with the behavior. The cognitive benefit, enhanced executive function and mental clarity through the working day, provides a second reinforcement loop. And the social context, which I will address in the next section, provides a third. When all three layers align, adherence stops being a fight and becomes a default. This has profound implications for designing biohacking protocols for neurodivergent individuals, and honestly, for anyone who has ever struggled to make healthy behavior stick.
Part 7. The Social and Tribe Layer. Why your biohacking protocol is incomplete without a tribe. This is the part of the biohacking conversation that nobody wants to monetize because you cannot sell it as a supplement, a device, or a program. But the data on it is as strong as almost anything else in this space, so let me be direct about it. None of the physiology I have described, the circadian optimization, the mitochondrial biogenesis, the HRV improvements, the sleep score gains, would have been sustainable without a social layer, without what I came to call the tribe. The FIT partnership functioned as what sociologists describe as a Gemeinschaft, a tight-knit, identity-forming micro-community, the kind of social structure that urbanization and digital life have systematically dissolved from most people's daily experience. The familiar faces at morning sessions, the trainers who understood that I was running a company and an 8-month metabolic experiment simultaneously, the quiet, accumulated accountability of being known by people who show up at the same time you do.
These social layers converted intention into habit in a way that no app, no accountability partner, and no willpower strategy had previously managed to do. The literature on this is unambiguous. Group exercise membership is associated with multiple forms of social support: emotional, informational, companionship, and validation, all of which link to stronger exercise identity and higher weekly activity levels. Experimental work shows that social reward and support during exercise increases positive affect, energy, and performance, even at equivalent objective workloads. And qualitative analyses of high-intensity boutique fitness cultures describe these environments as exactly this kind of modern community, places where belonging, identity, and shared purpose create the motivational infrastructure that individual willpower cannot reliably provide. For the biohacking community specifically, this has a critical implication. Most biohacking is designed as a solo pursuit: personal data, personal protocols, personal optimization. And there is tremendous value in that individual rigor. But the long-term sustainability of any health behavior change intervention, including the most sophisticated circadian metabolism protocol, depends on social scaffolding. The environment must be engineered to make adherence automatic, and no single component of that environment is more powerful than the people you share it with. For the neurodivergent individual building a biotech company, navigating the constant context switching, decision fatigue, and dopamine reward challenges that come with that life, having a physical space with predictable rituals, familiar faces, and unconditional belonging was not a nice to have. It was a prerequisite for sustainable high performance. The biohacking takeaway is this: when you are designing your circadian protocol, do not just ask which facility has the best infrared sauna or the most advanced HBOT chamber. Ask which environment will surround you with people who share your commitment to longevity and metabolic health, because the social Zeitgeber, the tribe that pulls you out of bed at 8:15 regardless of how you feel, is at least as powerful as the light exposure, the cold plunge, and the fasted morning walk combined.
Part 8. The Protocol. The Precision Biohacking Protocol, your complete circadian blueprint. Let me bring everything together into a concrete, actionable biohacking protocol, the architecture of a 24-hour cycle built from 8 months of N=1 data and grounded in the best available evidence in chronobiology, exercise science, and metabolic medicine. This is what I call precision life applied to the 24-hour cycle. Not a morning routine, not a stack of supplements, a complete evidence-based redesign of your biology around your personal circadian phenotype. The circadian clock structure looks like this. From midnight to 06, deep sleep and cellular repair. This is the window for growth hormone release, immune surveillance, and the neural consolidation of memory. Protecting this window is non-negotiable. It cannot be compensated for with anything else in your biohacking stack. From 06 to 8:30, wake and light exposure. Natural cortisol rises sharply at wake. Blue-spectrum morning light exposure, ideally outdoors, suppresses residual melatonin and delivers the primary photic Zeitgeber signal that anchors your central clock. This window is also the most effective time for a brief fasting walk or light mobility work if your schedule allows. From 8:30 to 10:30, the optimal exercise window. This is the peak performance phase, the sweet spot where cortisol is elevated, core body temperature is rising, peripheral clocks are maximally receptive to entrainment, and melatonin has fully cleared. Anchor your primary training here: resistance work, HIIT, metabolic circuits. Finish with Pilates or yoga for the parasympathetic wind-down. From 10:30 to 17, the cognitive peak.
Following exercise-driven PGC-1 alpha activation and the metabolic headroom created by morning fasting, this is the window for your highest complexity cognitive work, strategic thinking, complex problem-solving, creative output. Schedule your most demanding intellectual tasks here. Avoid meetings that could be emails. Protect this window with the same ferocity you protect your training. From 17 to 2100 recovery modalities and wind down. If you use HBOT, infrared sauna, or cold exposure, this is the optimal window. Late enough to be post-performance, early enough to avoid the sleep-disrupting core temperature elevation of late-night heat exposure. Use this window strategically, not compulsively. From 2100 to midnight, sleep preparation. Melatonin rises. Core body temperature must fall. Dim the lights. Blue light blocking after 2030 is not optional if you take your sleep score seriously. Avoid high-strain exercise, large meals, and high-intensity screen stimulation. This window is as important as the training window. Both deserve deliberate design. Now here is the critical individualization caveat, and I want you to hear this clearly because it is the central message of this entire video. The protocol I just described reflects my personal circadian phenotype. I am, as it turns out, metabolically typical in my response to morning versus evening exercise, but many people are not. Evening chronotypes, shift workers, and neurodivergent populations often show inverted or attenuated patterns. The 28-point sleep quality improvement I achieved is clinically meaningful for me. You might see a 5-point shift, directionally correct but practically negligible, or you might see the opposite pattern entirely. This is why the real biohacking work is not following my protocol, it is discovering yours. Use continuous wearables. Run systematic N=1 experiments with your own exercise timing. Map your hormone rhythms, your HRV dynamics, your glucose stability across different intervention windows. Build your personalized 24-hour blueprint from your own biology, not from population averages, not from viral biohacking trends, and not from what works for me. The Circadian Metabolism Advisory Clinic at Cortex Bio was built to do exactly this at scale. For frequent travelers managing jet lag and circadian disruption, for shift workers whose metabolic health is quietly being eroded by misaligned timing, for patients with metabolic syndrome or type 2 diabetes, where chronopharmacology can improve both medication efficacy and side effect profiles, for neurodivergent individuals for whom generic advice consistently fails, and for longevity enthusiasts who want to re-architect not just how they live, but how they age. To summarize the core biohacking takeaways from this video, timing is not optional. Exercise at 8:30 and 14:30 produces radically different biological outcomes. Your circadian phenotype is unique. Discovering yours requires data, not assumption. Exercise is the gold standard mitochondrial intervention. Everything else is adjunct. Behavioral change is a systems design problem. Willpower fails, design succeeds. And your tribe sustains you. Belonging is a biological need, not a lifestyle preference. If this video gave you a new lens on your biohacking practice, if it made you want to question when you do what you do, not just what you do, please subscribe. Leave a comment below telling me what time you currently train and what your Oura Ring sleep score averages, and share this with someone who is still optimizing their stack without ever thinking about their clock. Because the most powerful biohacking protocol you will ever run is the one designed specifically for your biology, not for the average, for you. I will see you in the next video.
Don't forget, always ask advices to physician before applying it.